Hi there and welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a group planting with these seed-grown wild olives. If you find the following content helpful, then you can thank me by clicking the thanks button just below the video. I'm going to try to represent a grove of wild olives as I would typically find them when I'm out in the field wanting to collect wild olives. There's a variety in the material that I've chosen, so I've tried to choose things that have got thicker trunks than others, that have longer growth, and then others that have a lot of low down growth. And this is just going to help me to create visual interest. Stick to odd numbers of trees rather than even numbers. It's not a rule, but you will find that it's just easier to work with an odd number of trees, because the moment you go over to even numbers, it's very easy to fall into a very symmetrical approach to the group planting. But now, before I start to process the trees, I'm going to prepare the container. So the first step will be in preparing our container is to cover the drainage holes with mesh so that the growing media doesn't fall through. And to do that, I've got some aluminium wire that I've cut. And I've also got I've pre-cut some drainage mesh, just plastic drainage mesh. So with my drainage holes covered, I can move on to the next step of preparing the container, and that is going to require some skewers. These are usually used for barbecuing, or as we call it in South Africa, braaiing. And these skewers are going to be used to form a like a grid onto which we can attach our trees. Firstly, we're going to need 2 or 3, let's use 3 cross pieces, and I'm using a branch cutter just to shorten these sticks. So I'm going to do 3 of those. This one can be a little bit longer, it's going to be in the middle, so we're going to position them something like this, and then over this we're going to put these sticks, and then we're going to space them apart, and so I'm going to secure them to one another, or fasten them to one another using some wire. So with the lattice or little framework now prepared, I now need to secure this into the container so that it can't obviously move or fall out. With the container now prepared and ready for planting, I can now start working on my trees. So I've got my trees ready here to be washed, and I've got a bucket which I'm going to put water into because it's going to take a few minutes to wash off all the trees, and also it'll be a while before they actually make it into the planting. So this is a way just to make sure that the roots don't dry out entirely. Finished washing off the plant material, and now we can start placing it in the container. It's a good idea to have your material sort of spread apart so that you can see what you have available for you to use. The first tree that you need to position is going to be your main tree, and this will be the largest, so the tallest, and which would then of course be the thickest tree usually. It would make sense that if you have a grove of trees, that this tree would be growing taller and straighter in an effort to get to the sunlight quicker. You wouldn't place it in the dead center, you'd place it either to the left or to the right, also towards the front of the container. I'm just going to prune this tree back a little bit. It's not necessary to keep all of its growth, and it'll make it easier to fit other trees in close to it. And then we need to remove any downward growing roots. Now I'm just going to put in a piece of wire. As I said, this main tree, this first tree, is the most important tree to position correctly, and this is now when your framework at the bottom here is going to come in very handy, because now you can position your tree wherever you want to and have a good anchor for it. This is pure akadama, fine akadama, and that's going to work well for these little wild olives. So I'm just roughly going to position the trees. A lot of the trunks are actually very similar in thickness, and so I just need to be careful about the positioning of the trees and how they look in contrast to one another, because ideally what you want to do is position thick trees, thinner trees next to thick trees, because then it enhances that the difference in the girth and makes it more visually interesting. Okay, now I've got my second tree in position. You need to think about placing trees in the foreground and in the background, because this is going to give your planting depth. And you can also, as I mentioned earlier on, consider having groups of trees. So instead of just having everything in just one big forest all grouped together, you can break the forest down into smaller units. You'll find that with the forest plantings that you need to get the trunks quite close to one another, and in order to do that you really need to work the root ball quite a lot in order for it to fit that, for the trees to fit quite snugly. Now when you're viewing your forest and you're deciding where to put material, you don't want to space it out as if it looks like it was planted by a forestry company. So you need to vary the distances between the trunks. So you need to get some closer and some further away. And then also you need to bear in mind the sun. So if the sun is overhead and moving, obviously rising and then setting, trees will want to get to that sun. So they need to, if you have a main tree that is growing, it will automatically always grow vertically, and then the other trees, in order to survive and get sufficient sun, they will be growing outwards. So you also won't have branches growing to the interior of the forest either, because they wouldn't be able to exist in nature, because they wouldn't be getting any sun. So they would be very weak if they did develop, and eventually they would die. From the front, you also don't want trunks to align. It's going to be very difficult to see this on the camera, but you don't want a trunk and then a trunk directly behind it. And you also don't want those trunks to be crossing over one another. Not only do you need to vary the positioning of the trunks when viewed from the front, but also from the side, you don't want everything to be in a row. Now, it's always very important to have a tiny little tree to place towards the back of the group planting, because this gives it adds to the illusion of depth. If you found that content helpful and you'd like to thank me for it, please do so now by clicking the thanks button just below the video. You will notice that the canopy has an overall outline, if you like. You're not going to have you will not find in a forest trees that are just jutting out from one another. Well, I suppose the exception always proves the rule, or disproves the rule, whichever way you want to say it. But in this case, there is going to be an overall outline of the trees. You have an angle change which moves from this sort of angle, and then it goes more upright, and then it changes to the opposite angle for trees coming onto this side of the planting. And the obvious reason for that is due to the sun and the need for the trees to grow towards where they will get the most sunlight. So now I've watered the planting. The purpose of top dressing is just to really stabilize the soil so that there's not going to be any movement in it, which will prevent root development near the surface. I'm now finished. The moss has been applied. I'm now going to put this into a shady sort of location. This growing season, just let it recover, develop a good root system. Hope you've enjoyed this workshop, and hope it inspires you to go out and get some material and grow your own forest. You will see this forest again, I'm sure, in the future as I develop it further, and then you'll see the progression, and then you can apply the same techniques to your group plantings. So thanks once again for watching. If you haven't done so yet, please do like and subscribe to my channel. And I usually do uploads on every Friday afternoon around 5 o'clock. Till next time, take care. Goodbye.